guys, and welcome back. It's a little chilly in the shop. Hopefully the heat will kick in soon, but in the meantime, what are we talking about today? Quarter sheet sanders. Not about them, not what they do, but with some of the smaller pieces that I might work on, sometimes it's nice not to work on it like this, but to have the sander like this and be able to use the piece on top as like a little sanding station. So today, I'm going to show you guys how to make the bracket to hold it like this to free up both your bits so that you can work on your sander as a station. Alright, so this is a fairly simple project, but if you're going to be working on smaller pieces, it can be a useful one. And the first thing you want to do is you want to take some measurements off of your sander. The measurement that you're going to need in particular is the diameter of this round section of your sander right here. And it doesn't have to be exact. You just want it close. And in this case here, it looks like I'm going to be doing about 2 5/8, 2.5, 2 5/8. Let's call it 2.5. See how exact it is? So that will be the diameter of the circle that we're going to need to cut into a piece of wood. At 2.5, I'm going to make the base plate for this at 5 by 5. So we're going to need a piece of wood now, 5 inches by 5 inches. So we have a 5-inch by 5-inch block of 3/4 inch pine. It's really nothing special. This is just a silly little bracket. You don't have to make it out of maple or walnut or anything like that. Pine is just fine in this instance. The 5-inch by 5-inch measurement is just an arbitrary measurement. It's just one that I chose for this project. You may prefer a larger surface to work with, or you may choose a 5 by 5 or something even smaller. It's up to you. But the first step you want to do once you get your 5 by 5 block of wood is you want to find the center of it. Now for me, for this little project, I'm just using a center finder. These are a handy little unit. I mean, it's not rocket science, but you could also just draw a line from corner to corner. Your intersecting lines then become your center of a 5 by 5 piece. But once we've got our center, we want to use a compass and just draw our 2.5-inch circle in the center of our board. So now that we've got our circle drawn, we want to cut this circle out. So there's any number of ways that you can do it. You can use a hole saw, you can use a Forstner bit if you have one that's 2.5 inches, or you could do like a 2 1/4 Forstner bit and sand outside to the edges. Bandsaw with a smaller curved blade. For me though, I'm sure you guys know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this over to the scroll saw and cut out that circle. At this point in time in the project, you want to pay attention to the way that the grain is running. You want to look at it, and with the grain, in this case the grain is running along this way, you want to mark a center line. So this will be at 2.5 inches to the project. A little further along, once we do another couple of markings here, we will actually be taking this to the table saw and cutting it at that line. This will be actually the separation line between the two sections. Then going against the grain, you want to put a mark halfway between what is left here in our outside edge material, and what is left here is 1 1/4 inches. So you really need a center mark here, marked on the end of the project at 5/8 in from each side, and we will afterwards be drilling holes
5/8 of an inch all the way through. And this will be for the mounting bolts that will make this in essence as a clamp to hold on to our quarter sheet sander. So you can see here now that we've got our center holes marked on both sides here, and these will be for the bolts that go through the entire piece. But for now, we're going to take it over to the table saw and we're going to cut it in half. So we'll set our fence at 2.5 inches and cut this in half. So we've got our piece cut in half now, and we want to test it against our sander to make sure that when this clamps around the sander that we're going to get a tight fit. So you just want to hold it there and just give it a little squeeze and just see that it's going to hold tightly, and this one's going to work just fine. If this at this point in time were too tight, you could sand the inside edge here to give you a little more room. If it were too loose, you could take off a little more of these inside edges to give you more clamping space. But this one here actually worked out just fine. So now we're just going to move on to the next step, which will be drilling the holes. So I'm here at the drill press, and I really didn't want to be mucking around with trying to get each one of these holes drilled exact so that they all line up. So what I've done is set my fence so that I get the proper distance in the center, and then I've clamped on a stop block so that all I would have to do is drill this side and then flip the piece around, and then it's already aligned to do the next side. Same with the second piece. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these through holes for my bolts for this clamp. Alright, so we have our 1/4 inch holes drilled through both of these pieces, and now it's time for another test fit. We just want to make sure that everything is going together properly and that we're not going to have problems with fit, once we carry on with this. So what I've got here is some 5.5 inch 1/4 20 thread bolts, and I also had some of these 1/4 20 thread jig knobs kicking around. So these are the parts I'm going to use. So in essence, the bolts will slide through the one set of holes, and this is a little awkward now at this point because of course everything's floating. We haven't made the base yet. And then the other piece lines up like such, and then your jig knob goes on, and the object here is just to make sure that you get a nice snug fit and that it's going to clamp our sander in there properly. Of course, it doesn't clamp anything in properly if you're having problems getting the jig knob on. And there we go. So I can see here that it clamps it nice and tight. I mean, I can't spin that. So that's going to hold our sander beautifully there upside down for us. Now what we need is the platform to hold the sander like this without it shifting around too much. So we've done our test clamp and our sander fits in here nicely and it's nice and tight. What we want now is a measurement from this surface of the top of our clamping mechanism to just above the top of our sander. And you want to give yourself a little bit of play, of course. So in this case, I think I'm going to go 2.5 inches. So it'll be 2.5 inches wide, but we're going to want it to be, leaving a little bit of slack here, 4 3/4 of an inch long. So I'm going to cut some 3/4 pine, 2.5 wide, by 4 3/4 long, and I'll just show you what those are for once I get those cut. Alright, and as this project is a work in progress, and as you go along you make little changes, I just made a change. Instead of 2.5 inches high on these pieces here, I actually made it 2 1/4. After I checked it out, 2 1/4 just seemed to fit better for me. I've also got this particular piece here that I've cut for the base of our sander stand, and this particular piece is the 5 inches wide, and it's about 8 1/4 long, I believe. I'll just check that. Yeah, it's 8 1/4 long. The length doesn't matter as long as it's longer than your base for your sander to give you room to put a couple clamps there to hold it in place. So let me just show you what these pieces here are for. These pieces are going to support your sander above your work area. So these will be glued in place, and this will be your sander mount. So I'm going to glue this up now, and I'll take a video of gluing it up because there's one important part that you want to make sure that you don't glue up. So you can see here now that I've got this taken apart, and I've removed the knobs off the front, and I've pulled this section off. Well, now you want to put that aside because the last thing you want to do is to glue that part onto your supports here. If you do that, you won't have the sliding motion of the clamp, and you've just made your project useless. So in a nutshell here, all we want to do is we want to glue these uprights flush and to the back and to the side of the project. Same with this other side, flush to the back and the side here. And then you want to glue this 1/2 of the clamp flush onto the back and onto the sides of the project here, and you should end up with something that looks like this. So now let me just run through how this works. So we've got our little jig put together now, and what we want to do is you want to take the cord of your sander and run it through this little back hole here. Once you get it through, your sander will sit just like so. And from there you want to take your front bracket piece and slide that onto your bolt mountings. From there, of course, your jig knobs will go on to tighten this up. And of course you can adjust it how you like. You want to make sure that you get the sander put in there tightly so that it's not going to move around on you. Once you get it set in your jig, you want to take some quick grip clamps or whatever clamp you prefer, and with this lip that sticks out, just clamp it to your table. Now the one nice thing about this jig is your knobs are right here in front, so it's easy to do and undo, and as well your power switch is right here in front, so just give her a flick and you've got the power to your sander to do your work. So by having this like this now, you have a work surface here for you to sand smaller pieces on, and we'll just turn it on for just a bit to show you how stable this is. And that's not going anywhere. It's a great little project. Turns your quarter sheet sander into a great little small work table sanding surface. And there you have it. Guys, this is a great little jig for your quarter sheet sander to turn it into a little sanding workstation. Of course,
the measurements that I've given you here are for my particular sander. You may have to do some tweaking of your own, or you may come up with your own versions. By all means, do it. That's what it's all about. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you again next week with another woodworking video.